The day I split from David, he rolled in with his so-called dream girl. We'd just wrapped up signing our divorce papers when he dashed next door to lock down a marriage certificate with her. Maybe his lifelong dream finally came true, and he got so hyped up that he had a stroke. Now he's stuck with paralysis. I gotta say, David cheated, but I haven't got any solid proof yet, and jumping the gun with divorce talk? Nah, not smart. A cheater deserves nothing. I'm holding the divorce papers already filled and signed by me, even though I decided to bail on him. My chest still feels tight just looking at those papers. And I'm that. I shove the agreement into the bottom drawer of the nightstand. Then I hear some noise at the door. David's back. Looks like he's been drinking. The smell of booze hits me hard. I scowl but don't move to help him. David lifts his head and stares at me. Not sure how long it's been, but eventually he stretches out his hand. Honey, help me take a shower. I look away. Do it yourself. You're not even that drunk, and I hate the smell of alcohol. David drops his hand, hangs his head, and heads straight to the bedroom. Soon after, I hear water running from the bathroom. I lean against the doorframe and my eyes drift to the photo on the table. It's from our college days. I chased after David for 2 whole years before we finally got together in our senior year. Back then, all his friends kept telling me to quit because he had an ex named Sophie. To me, Sophie was this awesome dancer and super pretty girl. She got into our school with extra points for her art skills. During military training, she blew everyone away with her fan dance performance and became a campus sensation. Her pics and name were plastered all over the confession wall. But out of all her admirers, Sophie ended up with David. David was also a total catch, top of the class in looks and physique. No surprise when Sophie and David hooked up. Everyone thought they were perfect for each other. But less than 6 months into their relationship, Sophie dumped him. The next day, she started dating this rich kid from our school. David couldn't bounce back from the breakup, and I met him about a week after Sophie left him. That day, some folks organized a karaoke night and invited my roommate. After some back and forth, my roommate got all 4 of us from our dorm to go. That was the first time I saw David up close. He was really handsome, every bit my type. When you like someone, you gotta go for it, right? So I added David on WeChat, and he didn't shut me down. It felt like I had a shot. I chased him for 2 years, despite everyone telling me to quit. David's face was just perfect for me. Even if he wasn't into me, seeing him daily made me feel better. But he actually took my confession. After graduation, he wanted to start a business, and I backed him up. Through all his tough times, I was there every step. Spent 7 years of my youth on him. Now, less than a year into our marriage, he's already cheated. Lost in thought, staring at the photo, I didn't even notice David standing behind me. It wasn't until he spoke that I snapped out of it. Emma, what's up? Why are you drinking again? I turned around, acting like everything was cool, leaning closer to him. The booze smell was way less now, mostly replaced by his body wash scent. David reached out and gently rubbed my head. Been a lot of socializing lately, had to drink. No choice. I nodded, didn't push it, and headed to the bathroom. Checked the laundry basket, grabbed his clothes, and took a closer look. The white shirt he wore today had a faint lipstick stain on the back collar. David's always been so tidy. He wouldn't let something like that slip. So it had to be his mistress, purposely leaving a mark while David wasn't watching. I tossed the shirt back into the basket. A constant prickling pain gnawed at my chest. Now that David's career is booming, people tried setting him up with girls, but he always shut them down. I thought he was different from the rest. After my shower, I came out to find David asleep on the couch, lying there quietly. Moonlight mixed with the warm streetlight glow, softly lighting up his handsome face. I gently touched his face. He really is a good-looking guy. I got his clothes ready for tomorrow and, after a moment's hesitation, slipped a tiny tracker into one of his pockets. The next morning, when I woke up, David was already gone. I hugged myself, burying my head in my knees. When did David start acting weird? It seemed like it kicked off the day before Sophie popped back into the scene. I got dressed, tidied up the place, made some food, and watched the clock tick. At 11:30, I grabbed my bag and left the house. My phone showed David was at the office. I grabbed the packed meal and headed straight to his company. Everyone there knew me, not just as David's wife, but also as one of the founders. A lot of board decisions needed my okay. I walked into David's office, but He wasn't there, so I sat on the couch waiting. Instead of David alone, I saw him walking in with Laura by his side. David even held the door open for her thoughtfully. When he saw me in his office, he stiffened visibly. Laura stayed cool, smiling and extending her hand to greet me, looking all graceful and confident. "You must be David's wife? You're so beautiful. David's lucky to have such a stunning woman." I smiled and shook her hand. "Not at all, Sophie." Sophie pretended to be surprised. "Oh, you already know who I am. David's ex-girlfriend Sophie was a total sensation back in college. Who wouldn't know her?" I made sure to stress ex-girlfriend. Sophie's expression cracked a bit, and David looked away. He noticed the lunchbox on the table and cleared his throat. "Emma, why did you suddenly bring me lunch? Didn't you drink yesterday? You also left early this morning. So I made some soup that's good for your stomach and packed you a meal. You need to take better care of your health." I smiled as I opened the lunchbox, letting the aroma fill the air. Confident in my cooking, I set out the meal on the table. 2 dishes and a soup. "You eat first. I'm heading home now." As I turned to leave, David called out, "Emma, aren't you staying to eat with me?" "No, I've got plans to go shopping with a friend." At the door, I suddenly stopped and looked back at Sophie. "By the way, Sophie, what position do you hold here? I remember you studied dance, right? That fan dance of yours sure made you a campus star." "Oh, she's my assistant, a new hire. Sophie's pretty efficient." I nodded without pushing further. It's rare to see exes get along so well. Leaving David looking uneasy, I walked out. Turns out, I came to see how far David would go for Sophie. Seems like he's not scared of rumors and is cool keeping Sophie right under his nose. Suddenly, a message popped up on my phone. "Emma, where are you? I'll come pick you up." Checked it. It was from my bestie, Ruby. "I'm downstairs at the office. Hurry over," it said. I shut my phone and leaned back on the sofa in the lobby, pretending to nap since I said I was shopping. Can't let that lie get exposed so easily. I hopped into Ruby's car and she drove me straight to the biggest mall downtown. "You said I can grab anything I want. Don't back out now, and don't complain if I pick something pricey." "Chill, I'm using David's card." "No biggie." Ruby clicked her tongue twice. "You two still got such a tight relationship, and now you're both rolling in it. Finally. After 7 years of hustling together, we can finally live the good life. It's all been worth it. He cheated on me. I need your help." "No problem." "Wait, what? Cheated?" I stayed calm, nodded without showing any feelings. Ruby's jaw dropped like she saw a ghost. So, I reached over and pushed her chin down. "You don't need to do much. You're a lawyer. Your words matter. I've already got someone drafting the divorce papers. Just make sure he signs them when the time comes." "Got it. I'll handle it." Ruby's carefree vibe vanished as she nodded seriously, promising to help. Ruby's been my ride or die since we were kids. Every time I hit a low, she was there, helping me out bit by bit. She wrapped her arm around my shoulder. "Let's go. Today, we're maxing out that jerk's card." We walked into a clothing store together. She casually grabbed a dress and held it up against herself. "When did you find out?" I looked at Ruby in the mirror and nodded. "Looks good. You should try it on." I found out just recently, the day before Sophie came back. Forget it. I don't think it suits me when I pick a dress. It's not just about what I like. It has to suit me too. So why didn't you tell me? "I don't have solid proof yet. Isn't it possible he hasn't cheated? Does emotional cheating not count?" Ruby didn't say anything else but gave me a warm, approving look. I grabbed another dress and tossed it to her. "What are you smiling at? Go try it on." Ruby pouted, still a bit hesitant, but took the dress and went into the fitting room. Not long after, she came back with the dress. "Excuse me, this dress has a broken zipper," and an employee quickly checked it out and took the faulty dress away. Ruby looked at me, beaming. "See? It's broken. Do you still want it?" "Nope. You're right. What matters most is that it fits." Ruby and I shopped for over 4 hours, swiping David's card and buying tons of clothes. Finally, we ended up at a restaurant, slowly finishing our meal. Just as we wrapped up, a message popped up on my phone. I opened it to see a compressed file with a short message. "I've disguised it as you requested, waiting for you to settle the remaining balance. All right, I'll be there in half an hour." I glanced at Ruby and smiled in a way that might have seemed a bit creepy. Emma, what are you up to? Come with me to the amusement park. Something big is going down. At the amusement park, I headed straight to the plush toy booth. I randomly picked one up and paid for it right away. Ruby still didn't get what I was doing. There was no way I dragged her all the way here just for a stuffed toy. But soon enough, she saw the vendor hold up a QR code. Without missing a beat, I transferred 50,000 yuan. Ruby grabbed my hand. Are you insane? Spending 50,000 on a plush toy? I didn't answer Ruby and instead thanked the vendor. Thanks for handling this for me. You're paying for a service. No need to thank me, miss. I walked out holding the plush toy while Ruby silently pondered beside me. Figured it out yet? Whose card did you use? David's. Aren't you scared he'll get suspicious? He won't. Today's big expenses aren't just this one. He won't check every single one. Ruby gave a helpless smile. I told you, didn't I? Using a jerk's money to investigate him? It's so satisfying. Nah. In the car on the way home, I reviewed the photos someone sent me. The compressed file wasn't huge, but it had both photos and videos. Every pic clearly showed David's face, and in some, the woman's face was visible too. I zoomed in, and Sophie's face filled my phone screen. Glancing out the window, my reflection stared back at me. When I got home, David was sitting on the sofa waiting for me. Seeing me with all the shopping bags, he stood up and took them from my hands. Did you have fun today? I had a great time, shopped with Ruby for ages, ate hot pot, and hit the amusement park. But there were so many people there. We didn't get to do much. Every ride had crazy long lines. We were already wiped out from shopping all day. David sat beside me, quietly listening to my complaints. When I mentioned my legs were sore, he immediately started massaging them for me. He's always been like this. Patient, gentle, so considerate. Such a great guy if it weren't for the cheating. I couldn't find a single flaw in him. Over the next few days, I kept getting more photos from the investigator. In the pictures, David was smiling tenderly, taking Laura to all sorts of places he'd never taken me. I clutched my chest, feeling tight and curled up on the sofa. Could there be a single day he didn't spend time with Laura? A message notification popped up on my phone. It was a voice recording with a text message. Miss Emma, I thought about it, and I believe you should hear this yourself. I was puzzled, but hit play. There was some noise at first, then David's faint voice came through. After a bit of silence, his voice got clearer. Emma treats me so well, and I wouldn't be where I am without her help. But the one I've always loved is Laura. I couldn't let Emma down, so I married her. She loves me, so I married her. That's all I could give her. I agreed to be with her because she chased after me for 2 years. I thought she was interesting, and during those tough early days of the startup, someone had to stick with me. Laura left me back then because I didn't have money. But as long as I make enough, Laura will come back to me. Emma loves me too much. She won't ask for a divorce. She can't leave me. So as long as I don't make it too obvious, Emma won't blame me. I'll have Laura get rid of the baby first. It's too risky right now. If Emma finds out, I can't explain it. I've given Emma everything these past few years. Besides Laura, I haven't touched another woman. She's living comfortably now. Isn't that all thanks to me? The recording cut off, and my phone slipped from my hand, landing on the carpet with a dull thud. I don't know what I was thinking in those few seconds after the recording ended. All I knew was that I suddenly couldn't breathe, my chest tight and my heart aching hard. David. I'd given nearly 10 years of my youth to him. I stood by him for a decade. In the end, it was all on me. All these 10 years, the person he liked, the one he loved, was always Sophie. And now, Sophie's pregnant. She's carrying his child. I was just the extra in his story, so I won't block his happiness anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ruby's number. Hello? What's up? Emma? Are you ready for the divorce negotiations? Yeah, when are you free? I'm free tomorrow and the day after. Did you cry? What happened? Did that jerk David do something to you? I wiped my tears. It's nothing. I just want him to sign the divorce agreement and leave with nothing. The next day, I stopped David and handed him the divorce papers. He didn't take them. Ruby was already on her way. I have evidence of your affair, and Laura is pregnant, isn't she? You never really loved me, so I won't force it, and you don't need to threaten Sophie to abort the child. It's your own kid after all. You wouldn't be that heartless. Let's divorce. It'll be better for you, me, and her. You wouldn't want me to take this to court. Would you? I was just talking casually, but didn't expect David to sign immediately. Without hesitation, he signed the divorce agreement. He lowered his gaze, looking at me. I was dragging it out because I thought you didn't want a divorce. After all, you stood by me through 7 years of hard work, and I didn't want to treat you unfairly. But now that you've brought it up, I have no reason to disagree. If there's nothing else, I'll head to work now. Let's schedule a time to get the divorce certificate. After David said that, he left the house without looking back. I could feel his attitude turning cold. It must have been tough for him to keep up the act all this time, pretending for so many years. Holding the divorce agreement, I crouched in the corner, silently sobbing. He really had no feelings for me at all. He left so decisively. Emma, what's wrong? Where's David? Did he hurt you? I shook my head and threw myself into Ruby's arms, finally letting out my cries loud and clear. After what felt like forever, I calmed down and slowly stopped. Why? Why does he say he didn't want to treat me unfairly while doing exactly that? He doesn't even like me anymore, so why did he agree to my confession back then? I was ready to give up in senior year, but he was the one who said yes. He gave me hope. So why is he acting all high and mighty now, like even looking at me as a favor? Ruby saw how I was feeling and decided to take me out for a good time. We couldn't get the divorce certificate for another month, so Ruby took time off and flew with me to all sorts of places. I saw beautiful landscapes and witnessed other people's happiness. The knots in my heart slowly unraveled, and I started to feel a bit brighter inside. So, standing in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, watching David and Sophie holding hands in front of me, I felt no more emotional waves. Sophie, gently touching her barely visible belly, walked over to my side. She leaned in close to my ear, her voice sharp and mocking. After standing by him for so long, it was all for nothing. 7 or 8 years of your youth wasted. I almost feel sorry for you. I took a step back, creating distance between Sophie and me. That baby you're carrying is my husband's, right? David and I haven't even gotten our divorce certificate yet. And you're already in such a hurry to show off? I spoke softly so people nearby could hear. They started glancing at David and Sophie with disdain. Sophie's face went pale, and she hid behind David. He forced a stiff smile at me. Let's just get the divorce certificate quickly. The moment David and I got our divorce certificate, he immediately took Sophie to line up for their marriage certificate. The crowd that had gathered earlier didn't leave, and now they looked at David and Sophie with even more contempt. People passing by kept their distance from them. As for me, I didn't feel much. I looked at my divorce certificate several times, feeling pretty satisfied. Ruby had promised to pick me up for a big celebratory meal, so I sat on a bench at the Civil Affairs Bureau waiting for her. Then I saw it with my own eyes. Just as David and Laura finished getting their marriage certificate and were walking out the door, David suddenly collapsed to the ground. His body hit the floor with a loud thud, and people around him scrambled away in panic. I watched as Sophie started crying uncontrollably, but I still pulled out my phone and called for an ambulance. Then I hung up and turned to leave. Ruby showed up just as the ambulance arrived, worried trouble might find me. I quickly slipped into Ruby's car amid the crowd. Ruby, always curious, glanced at the chaotic scene with people rushing around and the ambulance pulling up. She looked like she wanted to peek, but I reached over and pushed her head back down. Stop being nosy. Let's get out of here. Wait, what happened? Who called the ambulance? Tell me. What's going on? Drive first. I'll explain on the way. Ruby took a few more glances outside before finally starting the car. As I looked at the crowded Civil Affairs Bureau through the rearview mirror, I started telling Ruby what just went down. When she heard that David collapsed right after getting the marriage certificate with Laura, she pulled over to a temporary parking spot and laughed for a solid 3 minutes before getting back on the road. I stared at her, completely speechless, not wanting to say anything more since David had already signed the divorce agreement. He agreed to leave with nothing. Now, the house and the car were mine. My shares in the company stayed, and I hadn't taken back his shares either. But he still transferred 5% of his shares to me, making me the largest shareholder. Why didn't you take full control of the company? I don't manage it as well as he does, and I can't just cut off his livelihood entirely. Besides, Sophie's pregnant, and once they have a child, expenses only go up. I was speaking from the heart. Even though David messed up, he didn't deserve to be completely ruined. Without money, how would he survive? I put the house up for sale online, bought a small apartment for myself, and hired movers to relocate everything to my new place all at once. Since David was in the hospital, I was left to handle the company affairs. Looking at the pile of documents in front of me, I felt a headache coming on. David used to handle all this, and I only took part in major decisions. It had been a long time since I had to go through so many files. After a long day at the office, I was relieved when it was finally time to go home. But as soon as I stepped outside, I saw Laura standing at the entrance, waiting. After I asked David for a divorce, she quit her job. David probably promised to give all his money to Sophie so she could live the life she wanted. But now, I looked at Laura dressed in a simple t-shirt and casual pants, and I was surprised. David had plenty of money in his account, so why was Sophie, who always loved dressing up, looking so plain now? As soon as Laura saw me, she rushed over. Her face looked worn out, like she hadn't slept well. "Emma, we need to talk." I nodded and took her to the convenience store downstairs. We sat inside, and she got straight to the point. "You knew David had a stroke from the start, didn't you?" I frowned and shook my head. David never mentioned it to me, but Sophie didn't seem to believe me. "Of course you knew. That's why you wanted to divorce him, right? Now he's paralyzed, and I have to take care of him." "Why should I? He promised he'd take care of me. He said no matter how much I spent, he'd always support me. And now look at the situation. As soon as they found out about the stroke, he became paralyzed. Not only do I have to take care of him, but I'm also pregnant. And all the money's gone." "You need to give me an explanation. You must cover all of David's medical expenses. Don't even think about dodging this. If you don't pay, I'll show up at your company every day to cause trouble. I'll make sure you can't get any work done or sign any contracts." I listened quietly as Sophie finished. I smiled gracefully. "Sophie, you can't get out of the marriage now. Can you?" Laura froze. I know his temperament, the so-called letting go for love. Letting the one you love be happy, that can happen once, but it won't happen a second time, especially not with the David we have now. He's seen enough backstabbing in the business world and believes that only when things are firmly in his control can he feel at ease. That includes you, Laura. I smiled faintly, picked up my bag, and prepared to leave, but Sophie rushed forward and blocked my way. Her voice was desperate. "Please, I'm begging you. I have no money. He's still in the hospital, and I really don't have any money left." I took a step back. "I thought you'd already run off with the money." Sophie froze at my words, and tears welled up in her eyes. "You think I didn't want to? If it weren't for David's assistant watching me, I'd have run a long time ago." At her words, I glanced around the convenience store, but didn't see David's assistant. I stepped toward the window and saw someone standing outside in a black shirt. I recognized him as the assistant David recently fired. It seemed odd since he was excellent and super loyal to David. Why did David suddenly fire him? Looks like David saw this coming. Did he know he was sick all along? I sat back down, lost in thought, recalling past events. David was always busy, sometimes working through the night without a break. Everyone said he was working himself to death. I felt the same, but couldn't convince him to slow down. So, I just let him be. I knew he wanted to make money. Without his relentless work, the company wouldn't have grown so fast. Looking back, there were signs something was wrong. David mentioned occasionally having ringing in his ears and headaches. The worst was when he was washing up and suddenly collapsed to the floor. I heard the noise and rushed to help him into a chair. He held his head for a long time before recovering. I poured him a glass of water and asked if he wanted to go to the hospital, but David just shook his head. My leg just went numb, and I got a bit dizzy. He probably just didn't rest enough. He was always stubborn like that, so I thought I'd arrange a full medical checkup for him soon. But before I could book the appointment, I found out David might be having an affair. Naturally, that got put on the back burner, but now it seems David must have gone to the hospital. Even though he worked himself crazy, he wasn't that careless to totally ignore his health. If something was wrong, he'd notice it first. I turned my head back inside. Didn't expect David to be such a planner. What do you mean? Sophie stared at me, trying to read my expression. Don't bother looking. I really didn't know about it, but David probably did. I have a feeling he's getting revenge on you. I looked at Sophie, my tone full of certainty. Her face turned ashen, realizing something she couldn't believe. No way. He loves me. He said it himself. He's always loved me. There's no way he's taking revenge on me. I half-heartedly agreed with a few noises, but my eyes stayed fixed on David's assistant outside the door. Have you forgotten? When you broke up with David so decisively, he drank until he vomited blood and ended up in the hospital. And what were you doing then? Oh, right. Watching fireworks with your rich new boyfriend. The fireworks were beautiful that night, and David watched the entire show by himself from his hospital room. Sophie collapsed back into her chair, her face deathly pale. I looked at her and smiled. Don't worry, I'm just guessing. No need to take it to heart or be scared. David still has shares in the company, and I won't fire him. He'll just be demoted. I'll make sure his salary is paid so you won't be short of anything. After saying that, I grabbed my bag and left. Before stepping out, I glanced back inside. Laura was still slumped in the chair, looking vacant and empty. I averted my gaze and made eye contact with David's assistant standing at the door. I nodded politely at him and then left. Back in the car, I didn't ask the driver to leave right away. Instead, I pulled a small notebook out of my bag. Opening it, the front page had David written clearly. Everything I just said wasn't made up, nor was it meant to scare Sophie. It was all written down clearly in David's journal. Humming a tune, I flipped through a couple of pages and tucked the notebook back into my bag. I'd found the journal while moving. David had hidden it deep, and if I hadn't taken down everything from the bed, I wouldn't have found the hidden compartment under the bed frame. Inside was this notebook. The journal held all of David's darkest thoughts. Only after reading it did I realize he wasn't as perfect as he seemed. I'd been with him since our senior year of college, living with him day and night for 7 more years after graduation. We'd been married for nearly 9 years total, and I never noticed his true personality, how deeply he hid it, how cunning he was. But some things he said were true. He accepted my confession and stayed with me just so he wouldn't be alone while starting his business. I had chased him for 2 whole years, no matter how many times he rejected me. I never left, so I was his best option. But some things he wrote were complete lies. He didn't love Laura. He was just bitter that she broke up with him for someone else. Laura might have been an obsession, but she wasn't the unattainable dream girl. He had gone to the hospital for tests. Nothing definitive was found, but the doctor suspected a stroke based on his symptoms and tests. A stroke could lead to paralysis. So, yeah, he knew all along. Sometimes I can't even tell which version of him is the real David. He wasn't entirely heartless toward me. In his journal, he wrote about planning to divorce me, but he didn't expect me to make the first move. He wrote that I was very good to him, so he wouldn't cling to me. The person he wanted to cling to was Sophie. I was so sure Sophie couldn't get out of the marriage because divorce needs both parties to agree. David finally got Sophie to himself, and he wasn't letting her go. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so eager to get the marriage certificate with Sophie, nor would he have sent his most trusted assistant to watch her. And the way he signed the agreement to leave me with nothing so quickly, it seemed he really wanted to make things tough for Laura. David, with all his effort, was truly meticulous. Drive. Let's go to the hospital. I leaned against the window and told the driver, to the hospital where David is? Yes, some things need to be returned to their rightful owner. I arrived at the hospital room and saw David lying in bed. Without hesitation, I pushed the door open and walked in. I placed the journal on the bedside table. David's eyes followed my movement, finally settling on his journal. David made some garbled sounds. I pretended not to understand, looking at him with concern. What's wrong? Feeling uncomfortable? Need me to call the doctor? David, unable to speak clearly, could only make incoherent noises. I glanced at the door, got up to close it, and then sat back down in the chair. David, you really are a selfish, self-centered person, ruining the lives of two women like this. I'm leaving your journal here. Whatever Laura sees when she finds it, and whatever consequences that brings, is none of my concern. These are the seeds you've sown, and now you'll have to reap them. In your mind, maybe you think you've been good to me, but don't forget. If it weren't for your selfishness in agreeing to my confession back in senior year, I wouldn't have wasted so much time on you. And let's not forget, you were unfaithful in our marriage. The only right thing you've ever done for me was signing the divorce papers, but divorcing me just to drag another woman down with you makes you even more disgusting to me. My phone buzzed and I glanced at it. It was a message from the driver downstairs. Boss, Sophie's back. I pocketed my phone and stood up, leaving the room without sparing him another glance. I didn't rush out but found a spot to hide and watch. I saw Laura enter the hospital room while David's assistant stood outside. I approached, and as soon as the assistant noticed me, he was about to speak. I gestured for him to be quiet, and he fell silent. He was on David's side. But between Laura and me, he leaned more toward me. I might not treat David well, but I'd never do anything to harm him. The assistant hadn't had much contact with Laura, so he didn't trust her. I stood at the door with the assistant. Laura had already found the journal I left in the hospital room. Just as I expected, she read it and reacted accordingly. She broke down, screaming and questioning David. But David just closed his eyes, not even glancing at her. Seeing no response, Laura started hitting and insulting him. I turned my head and looked at David's assistant. Aren't you going to step in? Am I even going to get paid now? I thought about it. He'd already been fired by David long ago. Probably not. He gave a bitter smile. Before the incident, David only paid me 1 month's salary in advance. Come back and work for me. You'll be my assistant. And if you do well, I'll give you a raise. Aren't you afraid I might leak company secrets? I glanced at Laura and David inside the hospital room. You won't. I don't know what David did to earn your loyalty, but if you're this dedicated to him, you wouldn't ruin the company when he needs money the most. Without the company, he couldn't even pay his medical bills. The assistant didn't say anything but took out his phone. I scanned the QR code on his screen and added him as a friend. Thank you. The assistant finished speaking and walked into the room. I stepped aside, standing behind the wall so no one could see me. The assistant would occasionally update me on David and Sophie's situation. I listened casually, not paying much attention. I didn't hear anything more from the assistant. The next time I heard about them was a year later. Laura had given birth to their child, but was soon taken into custody for child and spousal abuse. I put down my laptop and glanced at the assistant, who was focused on paperwork at his desk. Then I looked away. He really was loyal. I rubbed my temples and went back to handling my own work. From here on, none of this would involve me, whatever their fate might be. I was moving toward a future without them.